is not glamorous, but you know what? I don't care. Since I've moved to Arizona, I've read quite a few books, and I thought I should share some of my thoughts and feelings about them with you. So, let's begin. The first book I want to talk about is 1984. I've been told to read 1984 over and over and over again, and I never got around to it until now. Do I think it is a classic? Absolutely. Do I think that there are lessons to be learned from it? 100%. Do I think, like my mother constantly says, that it can be applied to today and that it is scarily accurate to our current situation? No. While I believe that we are capable of being watched at every second of every day, I don't actually believe that we are. I don't think that there are such a thing as the thought police. I don't think that there are actually FBI agents in our devices watching us and our every move. No one has the time, and to be quite frank, no one cares. As long as you're not on some kind of hit list or blacklist for something, I don't think anyone is watching you. And I also don't think that should you think against the government, that the government will kidnap you, starve you, beat you, rape you, torture you into submission. At least not here in the United States at this point in time in 2021. What surprised me the most about this book is that I know a lot of people read it in school. And it is George Orwell, but it's also very violent and strangely sexual. And I get there are a lot of really important lessons to be learned from the book, such as who controls the past controls the future. I think that's really important, and I do think that that is relevant today if the FBI watching us are not. Because that is how our textbooks and our histories are written. Our histories are written by the survivor, by the conqueror, not by the conquered. It's very difficult to find a history written by the people who were conquered. And when you do find it, it's very often that has been illegitimized as actual fact. It's only recently that we have started to look back on the way we tell the story of our country being the United States, and see the way that we treated the history and the story of the people that we defeated. We like to cover up our mistakes. Cough, cough, the Japanese internment camps and the total annihilation of the people who lived here before us. But we've started to uncover some of that, and we've started to listen to their stories. And I think that is really important, because it shouldn't be those who control the past control the future. It shouldn't work like that. The next book I read that I wanted to talk about is Crime and Punishment. I'm not going to pronounce the name of the author. It's Fyodor something. It starts with a D. If I attempt it, it's gonna be massacred. I'll Google it. How about that? Oh yeah, absolutely, I'm not getting that. Can you hear that?
Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky.
So Crime and Punishment was written by this person, and it's really interesting from a psychological point of view. I'm studying psychology, hence why I looked at it through this lens. If you haven't read it, spoiler alert, except for the fact that it was written in 1866, so you've had plenty of time to have read it. But it can be split up into 3 parts. The first part is where the main character contemplates a crime. The second is his mental struggle after he has completed the crime, dealing with guilt and hiding. And the third is when his crime starts to come to light and he's forced to face a punishment for it, hence Crime and Punishment. My interest came in with the first part where he was contemplating the crime and the reasons behind the crime, because it is not just an internal reason, it was also socially motivated, which is very interesting to think about. And then the second part, where he is feeling guilty and has all of this stress on him as part of his guilt for having committed that crime. There's this theory that if you commit a big crime, immediately afterwards you would be sick because your soul would be rebelling against the act that you committed. And that is a very interesting thought from a psychology point of view. Apart from the psychological intrigues of this book, I really enjoyed the way it was written. There's a reason that it is a classic and that people are still reading it. It's not the easiest to get through, and it's really, really long. But pop in an audiobook if reading isn't your jam, and just learn the story, because it's really interesting and I don't think it had been done before, which makes it even more fascinating to me. And the final book that I have read, it's actually a series. I don't know if you've heard of it. The main character goes by the name of Sherlock Holmes, has a friend named John Watson. You've probably heard of it. Sherlock Holmes comes in a series of about 7 books, depending on how the different individual stories are split up for you. The first one being A Study in Scarlet, and the last one being His Final Bow. I have read all of them because I started on one and I just had to keep going. The series is super fun. I enjoyed every second of it. For the longer works like The Hounds of Baskerville or The Valley of Fear or A Study in Scarlet, not only are there the stories of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, but there's also the stories of certain events, societies that happened in real life that Arthur Conan Doyle saw. It mentions the Pinkertons, it mentions the Freemans, it talks about the Ku Klux Klan. It really goes into a whole bunch of different events in a way that made it fun and accessible for the layperson who was reading at the time. I honestly think that Arthur Conan Doyle was sort of a precursor to what we now think of as murder mysteries, my personal favorite author of those being Agatha Christie. The way Sherlock Holmes solves a mystery is based entirely on logic and the power of observation. And his adventures are chronicalized by his friend and partner, Dr. John Watson. If you haven't seen the series or read the books, I absolutely recommend them. They are so influential to the genre of crime and murder mystery. And I do think it is a great way of getting into older forms of literature. If you think you are a modern literature sort of person, that classics don't interest you because the language is difficult or you don't understand the social constructs, I think Sherlock Holmes is a great way of getting into that because most people are aware of who Sherlock Holmes is and the kind of general story that will be created. And Arthur Conan Doyle wrote his stories to be serialized. So they came out in magazines or in newspapers, and so the layperson would buy it and read it. Much like some of Charles Dickens' shorter works. It's much easier to read and digest that way. At least I find. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments down below. And if there's any books you think I should read, also let me know. I'm slowly working through my poster. I have about 43 books left, so I'm halfway through. I'm also going to work my way through this, 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die by James Mustich. I'm very excited. I have not gone through and checked off the books that I've already read because there's no way I can read all of these books before I die and still read books that have come out since the publication of this book. So I'm going to check off the ones that I've already read. I did the math. If I read at the same rate that I'm reading now, it'll take me 67 years to get through all of these. I read about 100 books a year. Logically, that would leave me 10 years to finish this. But some of these books are very, very long, and some of these books are very, very dense, and my reading pace says that it'll take a very long time to get through all of these, because it's not just 1,000 books. It's 1,000 books plus some other books that potentially go with the book that has been suggested. So when you get to Little Women, there's also Little Men and Joe's Boys and all of those. Ooh, the more I look at it, the more I want to read all of the books. But if you're anything like me, your to-read list and your have-read list are two entirely different things. And the have-read list has so many old classics and old favorites that sometimes you'd rather go back to that list than the to-read list, and you just keep adding to the to-read list. That list is never going to go down, and you have to accept it. I have to accept that. But I'm still young, and I haven't accepted it yet. Let me know what you're reading in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!